Okay, people can hear me. Hello, hello. Do you see that photo? That's me. And that actually is me. That was the last time I bought the suit, and I wore that, and after that I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I'm just trying to use that suit as much as I can, just milk it. And also, shout out to Ben for the Jordans. Love those kicks. All right, well, we'll get started here. I would like to introduce panelists with me. First, start with Siberia. She's a growth leader at MobilityWare. She spent time at Jam City, DraftKings, and a bunch of other places. So, and she went to USC. I do not hate that school, but I low-key don't like that school. We'll get to that. And then we have Jeff. He's the VP of Growth at Hiatus, and he's also been at a bunch of other places, I think, within and another agency, Merkle, right? And also, I found something interesting about him, that he went to University of Pittsburgh. So we were kind of neighbors, and I didn't know about that. So I still have 412. If anyone's 412 here, well, no, Steelers suck. Okay, well, I mean, they do suck right now, so. All right, well, so these are wonderful panelists. I'm gonna ask some icebreaker questions. I already rattled on, so I'll stop and let them speak. So the first question is, Siberia, for you. What was the last thing you purchased after clicking on an ad?
So that's actually a great question. I was heavily advertised on Instagram by this company called Welding, and they sell this a two set of facial cupping. I don't know if any female audience can relate to that. Basically, they suck your skin or your face to boost your circulation, and that was the most recent purchase I made on Instagram.
Interesting. And what about you, Jeff?
I think only YouTube has worked for me before, like sponsorship. So I'll watch some like very niche stuff. Like I make video games for PC for fun. So some like engineering, IT, like anything related to building like a software. And you know, they would sell like an digital audio workstation for like video games. Like, okay, that's very specific for like what I'm looking for. I don't know any other products like this. So like I'll buy it from that YouTuber basically.
Interesting. Mine was Nike. They know I buy those shoes, and they just keep showing the ads to me, so I keep going with that. And yeah, I promise I don't resell them. Sometimes I do. So we'll get into the topic now. I think the first question is, let's start with the current strategy, right? Trying to understand, Siberia, with you. What is your current UA strategy, especially for all the 7 titles that you manage, and maybe more, I guess, I don't know. So like, what does that look like? The partner makeup, the channels that you focus on, the CPIs and stuff, like what does the strategy look like?
Yeah, good question, even though it's a very standard UA question. We are, first of all, a studio that's specialized in solitaire games, puzzle games, and we have a suite of 15 games that we're actually buying from with multi-million budget. So that itself comes with unique challenge in terms of how we allocate budget, where to spend on, and in terms of platform challenge, as everybody here is aware of, we still spend more on iOS, on Android, even though in terms of split, it's more like 60 to 40 split in spend, and that's not intentional. That's only because iOS is more expensive, and it's continuously getting more expensive with limited capacity to target your high, value users. And Android, on the other hand, is cheaper, but our user profile, the opposite of the split, 60% of the users is actually on Android. In terms of channel strategy, we actively are still buying on, of the 30 partners that we have, 30 plus partners that we have, we're actively spending on 12 of them only. I think as the consolidation is happening, has been happening around market, the top players have become more distinctive, have more advantage. The top 2 cents, I call them only 2 because Facebook is no longer competitive. At this point for us, at least, Google and ASA start to lead the chart, especially ASA. Since last year, we significantly increased the spend. However, we do have a lot of concern around the incrementality of ASA. Apple Search Ads as a platform as they start to become a dominant purchasing SANs, and 40% of our spend goes into them, and about 30 plus spend goes into the top SDKs. There are only two of them, two or three of them that everybody knows, AppLovin and these guys, and a number of DSPs as well. That's pretty much our channel spread based on the acquisition side of things. However, we do allocate about 10% of our budget to constantly learn new channels, especially venture into spaces like Connect TV and even doing research out of home, because we see branding becomes more important as there's increasing need to have our users stick around.
Interesting. Yeah, I was gonna. Does this work? Does it work? Or maybe I just
Technical difficulty. There you go.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you about the testing as well. Like, how do you look at testing when you have a specific mix that works for you, but definitely you're never in an ideal situation. It's never optimal. So what do you do to make it optimal?
That's a really good question. Because we're a mobile gaming company, we have so many, potential opportunities to work with everyone, and it goes back to the audience, right? Our core audience are people who are 50-plus-year-old, people who grew up playing solitaire on desktop. So they're kind of like, they live in the South States and they stick around for years. We're ad monetization based in terms of, ad revenue based in terms of our monetization. So with everything combined, we're really looking for partners who can align their success with ours in terms of the model, partners who are very invested in their infrastructure in terms of allowing you to buy users in a deeper funnel in terms of like time-based events or just events in a deeper funnel in general, so that we can be more confident in acquiring users with longer retention and ARPU, etc.
Makes sense. Yeah, I grew up playing solitaire on my desktop, and I'm not 50 plus. Just kidding. So, going over to Jeff. Jeff, how about you? Since you manage a lot of different sides within growth, how does your optimal strategy look like right now? Or how does your mix look like right now? And what do you do to make it optimal?
Yeah, so I'm not purely in UA, so I'm in acquisition, lifecycle, analytics, especially analytics right now, and I also advise on products, so it's like all sides of growth. But when I started at Hiatus like 2 years ago, I was only in UA and then kind of branched out over time into like everything else basically. I would say for UA, it's really good to get scale in the beginning, but like over time you want to like look at holistic growth, like what are ways that you can find the best risk profile for your objectives. So I work with the finance team a lot to look at the P&L and see where we want to be in the P&L by the end of the year. So like that can be lifecycle campaigns, that can be UA campaigns. I guess what are people interested in, like UA or lifecycle product? Yeah, I mean, just starting with UA, like we've been traditionally in digital with like the big SANs. Did like Facebook, Google, and then branched out to like TikTok, Snapchat, Reddit, Twitter, like pretty much everything. Apple search ads. We branched into like offline with podcast and some linear TV, just like a very small experiment there. We have to learn a lot into offline, but I think digital has like a lower risk profile and high like yield, so it's just like a higher priority. We're trying to do lifecycle more nowadays. Also good caveat for me specifically, if you guys have questions, is a year and a half ago, I did everything myself, and then we realized we were under hiring and not buying enough because like we just didn't have a lot of institutional knowledge. So going to events like AGS taught us like what's out there in the industry, like what to invest into. So nowadays I do a lot more like managing the team that does things. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And you mentioned podcast. Can you tell us a little more about that? It sounds pretty interesting. What did you do with podcasts, and how do you think about the audio ads in general?
So we haven't done a lot in audio. It's basically an offline channel. Like there's stuff like pod sites out there that does do probabilistic attribution. However, it's like sampled and not the most accurate. So if you get into that kind of world with like radio, you want to like tie that in with offline measurement strategies as well, like media mix modeling, surveys, to kind of like triangulate like what the answer is in terms of ROI. And that's like really, really important because as like a UA manager, you might not care as much about measurement and attribution, but when you're like a growth lead, it's almost everything because you have to prove out like the value of like very large investments, like multiple $1 million marketing budgets that, you know, like is basically your CEO's like bank account, so.
Or your investors too. So, okay, well, on using that as a segue, Siberia, a question for you. You mentioned about CTV, testing some bit of CTV. How has that worked out so far? And maybe in terms of other channels like influencer and stuff, do you do that on device, different channels? Have you tested these?
Yeah, good question. We're always open to test out our channels, but however, with the current climate, you know, everybody is kind of conservative in terms of how they spend and where they spend. We are not actively expanding into, additional channels, but in terms of CTV, we had a successful experiment with TV Scientific last year on one of our IP games, and we saw about 40% assisted installs plus 60% probabilistic installs. Working with them, focused on U.S. as national coverage for DMAs, and what's unique about CTV is. We have to be very careful of the game that we choose to advertise on because we have a standard suite of solitaire games that have very generic names, and with majority of a good portion of the attribution goes into assistant installs. We're actually also helping driving traffic to our competitors if we run CTV on these games. So that unique IP that we have, we call Monopoly Solitaire, actually is one of the few games that we can feel confident about working with CTV partners with. That's one of the concerns, even though as a result of that experiment, we do see that early retention, D1, D3, D7 of the CTV audience, combining with the assistant installs, are slightly better than our average other channel users.
Interesting. So if you execute that right, then there is definitely potential.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's more potential than the ones we ran because the creative that we have was good, but it wasn't, heavily A/B tested. We didn't even know if it was the best suitable creative for large screen TV. Usually that comes with more creative, more branding, more engagement. That type of creative, I think, will drive even better results.
Understood. I have a question about the creative. How about we talk about that? What do you see, and Jeff, I'll come back to you after this. In terms of the creatives in general, like how do you see the whole movement with AI changing the creative testing?
Yeah, great question. We just started to test ChatGPT on Google AdWords. So far, we haven't seen any significant lift, but we're at very early stage. However, where I do see ChatGPT can really provide value, at least in the case of mobile gaming, especially for a studio like ours, is that there's increasing demand to find culturally nuanced ads in localized region. If you're buying out of rest of the world and you have a very sizable budget, creative is a very, very extremely label-intensive department that requires research, understanding of local language, understanding of local market. So I think ChatGPT in that front can provide that additional lift to your creative team in terms of providing cultural insights on creative and allow you to do a bunch of quickly. Give you 100 options of maybe an ad in Portuguese in Brazil that you don't even know what they're talking about, but they can just give you that option to do things really quickly. Yeah.
Interesting. Same question for you, Jeff. How do you see the impact of AI on creative testing or even analytics on your side, right? That there has to be some bit of impact there. Helps make your lives easier.
Yeah, so a lot of our creatives are TikTok content, so it's like paid social, live action, UGC. That's where we found a really good product market fit because fintech has done a lot of those really graphic design, hundreds of either cheap graphic designs or AI is kind of a branch of that, so we haven't seen the best performance, which is why we focus on creating just entertaining content for advertising on paid social. So I don't think AI is going to affect that anytime soon. We're trying to use it to like impact our script writing, except it's not that good. Yeah. It does help us with like organic SEO actually. Like we are trying to expand upon our like long form content through AI, and on the analytics side, like I've never really used Python before, but I was able to do like a sentimentality analysis on user reviews to get a sense of, you know, like how people are feeling about like our products, and that was something like that ChatGPT really helped in the analytics of.
Understood. One more question for you. Since you manage the UA and monetization and analytics and all of those sites, like how do you see with all these new channels coming in, how do you see that across these different teams?
What do you mean by new channels?
So like all the different, let's say, from a traditional search and social to display to programmatic to now CTV and influencer and other things, with all the new stuff coming in, how does that impact the relationship between the UA and the monetization team internally? And what do you foresee, since you kind of oversee both, it's already, like you see that impact already, so how does that look like?
Yeah, so it's kind of an art and a science to it. Like the art is just evaluating like what the potential impact is, and until you have spend behind a channel, you never really know. And even when you have spend behind a channel, it could take months before you really know, because it could be night and day, like 2 months into a channel that you're testing for like what actually happens. So you kind of have to, like for me at least, just talk to a lot of people in the industry, like what they're seeing to get a sense of the different options out there. And then I talk with the finance team for where we want to be by the end of the year. And then I assign like a risk-reward ratio to like everything in UA and lifecycle. And then, you know, like for example, if the cost of capital is higher for like investment or something, then there's going to be more of a skew towards like lifecycle campaigns. You run it through your like CEO and then see if they like that plan for the year, and then you kind of assign resources that way. Like we have very modular resources at the company actually. Like our creative team supports both sides. So like they know how to make this, not only do they know how to make like TikTok content, they also can make graphic designs, long form content, product design. So we just switch that a little bit more towards like maybe the email side, depending on like what our objectives are with the executive team.
Makes sense. And same question for you, Siberia. How do you see that? Because with gaming, generally, you know, at least so far, the teams have been kind of separate. They work together, but then they've been separate, housed in different sort of, you know, units. And so how do you see that, you know, those teams coming together with these new channels and also the privacy and all that stuff, which, you know, Apple does for even kind of impacted the traditional channels as well?
Absolutely. We do see an increasing need for UA and monetization to work closer. And because of our business model, historically, we've always had a pretty close relationship. 95% of our revenue is at revenue based. And the feedback loop from monetization to UA is very tight because our LTV is largely determined by our monetization team, depending on the eCPM, depending on the number of impression, you know, who's buying from us, and that LTV is going to determine our CPI and the CPE and how we buy users. And sometimes monetization team has first-hand information ahead of LTV model that takes time to train and to be accurate. So they will come to us and tell us, you know, here are the, you know, incremental shift that we should do around our budget to, for example, T1 geo, rest of the world geo, this particular country, India, Malaysia. They will give us this feedback ahead of the loop of the LTV. And on the other hand, with the, you know, increasing actually decreasing accuracy around the knowledge of our users, it requires both sides of the house to be very analytical. So we need data-driven analytical talent, even on the UA side, to be, you know, almost as analytical as an analyst to work well together. That has becoming kind of an increasing need as well internally for both sides to challenge our model, ask questions, to understand each other. So we have unified two teams to become one team and report to the same person, and that helps us work together and also align our success together in terms of our testing, experiment. We run. There's increasing need to run incrementality tests with what's going on in the market, and with a lot of channels become like offline channels, right? Like Connect TV channels or even like influencer channels. It's very hard to run these simultaneously. Like, how do you figure out your best strategy? And this everything combined plays into how you want to work with the monetization team together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And since you mentioned LTV, there's also the CAC aspect to that, right? The pricing is very different across these channels, even within just a standard channel. For example, the programmatic channel with iOS ATT release, CACs went up significantly. So that's one side of it. So the changes to the existing channel and the sort of new channels coming in, how does your pricing get affected by that, and how does that play into your expectations from an LTV over CAC ratios?
We consistently trying to optimize towards like a 1 year blended blended payback window, but our game, it really depends on game. Each game is different. Our flagship game can have users coming back even in year 5, but we have growth newer titles just have like 1 year retention. It's not bad, right? But it's not as competitive as the other years. Sometimes we will have like kind of this mixed conversation. Should we, let the core games buy off of 2 years? That's an ongoing discussion. But in terms of standard, we still buy off of 1 year LTV. So then it's depending on LTV of each game. And then on iOS side, it's less accurate. So we still have to always fine-tune our model. So it's a kind of a case-by-case situation in terms of new channels. We still look at LTV at a game level, at a platform level to see where it's at. And then we set this sort of the same standard. Even when we go out and talk to a newer partner, we will give them sort of like the organic benchmark. Or if we think that they should bring us higher quality users, we will give them the ASA benchmark, which is usually higher than organic. They're like the top retention partners. But like I said, a lot of the ASA traffic is coming from organic. Depending on what we get from the partners, what the expectations are. If we work with a new DSP, I'm not going to expect them to drive me app-loving quality. That's just not going to happen. But we still want to set kind of a range for them to target. We don't want to acquire any users who don't have the potential to come back after the D60. So there's no point of, like, for example, running a payroll company who like have users leave after 30 days. It will work for, I used to work for JumpRamp. It will work for a company like JumpRamp where we have kind of offer war where we can monetize right away. But for mobility where everything is impression ad revenue based, you need retention. You need acquire users with retention. So, we treat each partner pretty equally in terms of fitting into our CAC to LTV model.
Understood. That makes sense. And I think for you, it's more app focused and more in-app ads or in-app purchases focused. For Jeff, it's on the other hand, it's also app plus web. So how does that play into your decision making when you have multiple gateways of entry to the people, for people into your system, and then not only the entry, also on the monetization side, it's all subscription based, right? So how does that work? It's a bit different for you and your industry.
It's a lot more complicated. Yeah. So analytics is really hard when you're on iOS, Android, and web to see, it's just different analytics systems. And like I used to make all our BI reports. We have some more people doing that now, but I used to write like every SQL report and trying to unify that between like iOS, Android, web is difficult, but it's worth doing. Once again, work with the finance team. At least someone in marketing should be working with the finance team to try and understand how it fits into the picture, even if it's like a modeled approach, even if it's not perfect, whether it's 1 year LTV, 2 year LTV. You just try to find a unified approach across all channels, and then we also have like the same LTV over CAC standard across channels. At least ratio-wise, like LTVs do tend to be different by channels. For subscriptions, like we're not like MAU based, we're not DAU based. We're purely on subscription length and churn. So we optimize not towards engagement, but towards creating user value. So they might not use the app. They might use the app like once a month, but it's important that they find like they could use it like over a long period of time. So it's like just trying to like isolate reviews, talk to customer service to find like why people are leaving, like what do they need, and it's like a huge aspect to talk to the product team. I'm sure like as you do for monetization too in an MAU model.
Got it. One last question for you. What is one nugget that you want to leave the audience with?
So I said I learned SQL a year and a half ago, but that was back when I was an individual contributor doing everything. I think it's worth thinking about having very flexible teams. Like we don't have a really like matrix style of management. So like no one is like 100% on marketing. It's like between 10 to like 80% is what each person is doing. Like our product manager is probably only like 20% or something. So I think it's just really good to be flexible and allocate resources more efficiently based off of that and give people like opportunities outside of their like silo.
What about you, Siberia?
Prioritization is so important because UA or growth in general is such a complex discipline that you have 100 million levers. I'm exaggerating, but you have so many levers that you can pull to optimize your strategy and optimize your operation. And what to do first? There's so many partners reach out to you every day, internally, operationally, working with product, monetization, or even finance. There's so many things going on. I found that prioritization right is going to give you so much more momentum and success and speed than trying 100 million things at the same time. Prioritization in terms of what's making both obviously most impact to the bottom line, but also prioritization of resources and aligning everyone to understand the impact of that prioritization is also crucial because every single team has a different understanding of what growth means in any company. So what they think is successful for the company is different from what we think is successful for the company. And what the challenge we have is with 100 million things we can test, choosing the right priority is going to help us succeed, with the time frame that we have.
Makes sense. So to summarize this, I would say be open to testing, but be able to prioritize, know what to test with.
Exactly.
And to summarize what Jeff said, be more analytical, understand what you're trying to do, and bring your monetization side closer. Those two are kind of the good key insights we can say. One more.
I want to add one point. Sometimes a test doesn't have to be working with a new partner. It could be an internal analytical test that, for example, you want to do something very creative, pause all of your paid campaign to see if your organic increases. That's a huge experiment. Not recommending everybody to do it, but that could be, if somebody considers this as a priority, but you think that bringing a partner such that can run CPE event, right, deep engagement event is going to bring more impact to the revenue for a quarter. So how do you debate that, right? That's two different dynamic of projects, but takes prioritization the same, probably like overlap a lot of resources when you do the test. So that's just to give an example.
Got it. Does anyone in the audience have any question for them? It's like no one has any question. Are you all hungry? Well, okay, Ben.
Yeah, so my question would be like, with creative content you're using, are you finding UGC to be better performing than say in-house creative necessarily?
I could take that because I spent like 6 months working with different freelancers and agencies until we just found a way to build our own creative team. And I think it just really depends on product market fit. So the creative that we do is not going to work for a different brand. So it's just like trying a lot of different things. I wouldn't recommend making a full-time hire until you've established what works. And then building in-house will just reduce your creative costs by a lot and also make it a lot better when you have someone that's familiar with the brand and wakes up every day trying to make like better content, basically.
Anyone else? Okay, well, one more panel after this before you get that food. Thank you for listening to us, and give it up for Siberia and Jeff.
Thank you.